If you don't give up, success is inevitable. Joe Clark quote. We'll start with that idea. So, you might say, well, Joe, you're 31 years old. How could you amass over 4, 3, and 5,000 works of classical music? Simple. I had a mentor as a 16, 15, and 17-year-old graduate from high school. His name was Freddie. Now, my high school, success leaves clues, kids, is what Dan Penna, my mentor who makes millionaires all over the world, says. He says success leaves clues. And the clue in my life for that was a violinist who I didn't play violin growing in orchestra. I played band percussion. So in the band percussion, I was in charge of snare drum, timpani, bells, which I didn't like bells. I liked snare drum and bass drum and timpani. And I would play those in the local band in school. But I remember I envied this. Now, envy is not bad, guys. It is bad, but only if you do something about it. So I envied this guy, Freddie, and he happened to be Chinese or Japanese or something. Or he was Oriental, we'll just say. And he said, keep going. He said, keep going. And I remember as a 16-year-old kid, that was like somebody, that was the equivalent of someone being in the desert. Because school for me was a lot like being in the desert when Jesus was fasting for 40 days. It was a horrible time. I graduated with 700 kids. I had a bully named Matt. Everyone distanced themselves from me. I had to go from the emos to the bullies to the fake women sitting down for lunch. And if you are a kid watching this and you see a kid sitting alone in lunch, please do the righteous thing and sit down next to him. That's my advice, because I never got that opportunity as a kid. I was outcasted. And part of the reason for that is at 12 years old, I was reading the Bible and praying, and they used to call me a Bible banger on the bus and all sorts of biblical names. One girl joked, is this dick holy because he reads the Bible? Like, it's just disgusting, these people growing up in the school system. But I wanted to say that Freddie said keep going, and I remember the equivalent of that, him saying keep going, was like a thirsty man in a desert for 3 days no water, and then getting a whole, like you'd see those gallons of waters from Walmart, getting the gallons of waters. And that's what it was like. And I remember thinking in my brain, I had a very beautiful brain back then, because my grandpa Joe noticed, he said, under the beautiful brain is the beautiful hair, use it. So Grandpa, I said in a previous video, it's in the way far down videos, there would be no Joe Clark without Joe Dolan. And I stand by that. There would be no Joe Clark without Joe Dolan, the 80 and 70-year-old grandpa that I had, who died in my junior year at high school. So anyway, we'll continue. So Freddie said keep going, and like I already equivalent to the desert thing, I said I will keep going and I will never give up. And once I graduated high school, I was doing electronic music. I did do EDM and dance music, believe it or not, and some of the pieces I did back then, I have an album of 6 pieces on my computer, still seem to remain. So I have a whole album of electronic music that remains. But besides the electronic music, I was struggling, because in college, what college really is, in my opinion, is a struggle. It's not a place to party, it's not a place to meet your friends, it's a struggle. And it's a struggle to grow from young adult to adult. And when I was in Hudson Valley, I was an outcast too there. And I would basically do electronic music on the side. I was more interested in doing magic tricks. I was into magic. So one of the magic tricks I did is I made a card levitate right off my hand. I learned that trick. That's a really good trick if you know how to do that. but I made a card levitate off my hand on a magic trick. So, but then God was starting to work on me and saying, Joe, do you want to be an EDM artist or do you want to be a classical artist? And I said, no, this doesn't fulfill my lust to compose this electronic music. All it is high flute and garbage. Even the best of my electronic music I came out with in Hudson Valley was garbage. So, even though it sounded good. And I knew that because I could tell that Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart were better than the crap that we hear constantly all over the radios. So I ended up switching from electronic music and going back to the sheet music and just filled book after book after book. I remember even on Christmas one time for my dad's, I was writing a prelude, fugue, and nocturne in an early book. So, and all these pieces are in an unknown location right now. They're going to be discovered one day. I won't tell you where it is, but they're not in this apartment. They're somewhere else. And I gotta say that I just kept going, and I didn't stop writing when I was 18. I didn't stop writing when I was 21. And then I started counting the pieces, and my mom got mad at me for this and started acting out crazily because I wanted to see how many pieces I have. And by the time I got done being 21 or 22 years old, I had 1,000 pieces in only 3 or 4 years. Can you imagine the amount of work I put in from 15 and 12 to 21 if I have 1,000 pieces in 10 years? So then I kept going and I wrote even more, and I was working on bigger and bigger orchestras, bigger and bigger choir, bigger and bigger everything. And I just kept going, and I never give up. That's what I want to say, never give up. Because if you give up, you're not going to succeed. If you give up on anything, you're not going to succeed. Like, I just played 2 pieces today. I played a cello suite that I wrote for solo cello, 2 pieces each. And I played a Bach prelude in the 8 Preludes and Fugues book by Bach, which I recommend you buy. There's 3 books I recommend you buy for piano, and then there's 1 book I recommend you buy for violin if you're a violinist or a pianist. The 1 book I recommend for violin is Bach's Sonatas and Fugues and Partitas for solo violin. That's for violin. And for piano, it's 8 Preludes and Fugues, the Well-Tempered Clavier, and the Goldberg Variations. So that's all I'm going to say.